Hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah. So, and do I have the slide control or is
I'll,
it?
I'll present I'll present that. You can tell me and
Okay,
I'll
that's fine. That's great.
yeah.
So, right. So, who this session is for? So, before I begin, let me give you a quick introduction about myself. I am a tech lead at TikTok, working on e-commerce recommendation algorithms on their TikTok Shop initiative that they launched a couple years ago. Um, Before TikTok, I was in a variety of e-commerce companies as a either as a lead machine learning scientist or a research scientist working on optimization algorithms, transportation optimization, logistics optimization, doing working on data-driven modeling and computational modeling more from the mathematical perspective initially, and now more towards agentic AI as well. So with that, let's move into who this session is for. Next slide, please, David. So typically, we have identified four different broad categories of career professionals. There's like the early career professionals who are just who have just graduated, who are in their first 0 to 5 year career phase. Then there are mid-level career folks who have spent some time in the industry, around like 5 to 15 years. They have some background on implementing complex business solutions. They also have gained a domain depth in their first 5 to 15 years. And then you have a third profile, which is your IC roles or the individual contributor roles who have again spent a decade or more or a couple of decades in the industry, but more so in the in the technical specialty as individual contributor. And then there's the complement to that, which is your same 15 to 20 years of experience in the industry, but more on the managerial side, leading technical product development and technical research, but more from the managerial point of view. So those are the four personas or the four kinds of individuals that typically are the roles are marketed towards these four type of individuals, and we'll be taking a brief look at what the profile of each one of these individuals could look like. Next slide, please. So beyond just these profiles, another thing that I wanted to point out is this session is not specifically for people trying to get into a machine learning role or a data science role or business analyst role. As you can probably tell from the job descriptions that you have read, there are lots of roles which are very, very interdisciplinary. And in the age of AI, with the advent of LLMs and agentic AI and modern tools and techniques out there, there's a lot of overlap between these roles. For example, the boundary between data science and machine learning is fairly blurry. Now, there are some specific clusters which are farther apart than some of the other clusters. For example, maybe site reliability engineering and business analysis, or iOS engineer and Android engineer. They might form their own cluster, but there's definitely still a large overlap between how their skills in, let's say, developing a particular piece of software can readily be translated into a machine learning operations pipeline or to that of a technical program manager or product manager. So while there are a lot of these roles which are advertised towards a particular job or a particular job code, this session will cater to pretty much anyone who is either wanting to transition into a ML or AI role, or even who is someone currently working in a niche domain of AI but wants to diversify or specialize even further. Next slide, please. Right. So now that we talked about those four different profiles and a variety of roles that encompass the machine learning and AI space, let's take a brief look in a little bit more detail on what these different personas could look like. So a lot of mid-career professionals who are in like their who have experience around 5 to 15 years, typically they have a very full stack background. They have strong data-driven projects on their resume. They are confident in executing certain complex solutions to to complex business problem, and they might be very well they might be very well at executing the code and a certain business requirement in their current curriculum or in their current job. But a lot of times in my experience, what I see is for people who have been in the industry for a while, the agentic AI revolution is throwing hundreds of tools at them at a very fast pace. And so what happens is that there's a certain amount of um, and an overwhelming feeling on what is noise, what is a signal, what tool should be mastered. If every day I learn one tool and a month later a new tool comes out, is it even worth it to learn a particular tool like this? And a lot of these conversations shape essentially end up becoming more and more confusing to them to follow a particular path. A lot of the times they are working on very impactful projects, and they are trying to identify how can they transition these impactful projects into an AI driven product as well. And that gap is something that we will try to address in today's session, and that would be very useful for these mid-career tech professionals belonging to this type of a profile. Do you have anything to add here, Parivesh?
No, I agree. And I think one thing I am personally seeing is that regardless of what kind of work stream you're in, AI, like it behooves you to think about like, is there any part of my work stream that can get automated? That takes a lot of time, right? And the idea then is that like, how can you reposition your work stream, right, through uses of our induction of the right tool. And so, I mean, having the ability to understand what is worthy of like getting automated through AI, and also reliably, right? And like, and how to choose the right tools, and how to like make it performant, right? There are a lot of things that you need to put together, but once done well, it kind of like makes your life easy, and also like lets you do things that you wanted to do forever but you couldn't because you were tied up in like grunt work or something like that, right? So I feel that this is also a good time to like think about how you can rediscover some portions of your jobs and become more and more efficient, by understanding the landscape and the strengths and weaknesses of the current approaches and where the field is heading. Yeah.
Right. Great. No, perfect. I think I agree. That is essentially where we will help you to address some of those opportunities on where can you identify those aspects of your job which can be enhanced by having an AI-driven workflow incorporated into it. Will also help you identify if AI is the right solution in this particular case or something else. That is also just as important of a question as is to build an AI-driven strategy. Next slide, please. Right. So that was about the earlier slide was about folks who had a little bit of experience who were looking to transition. On the flip side, there are early career professionals who are recently out of college. They are used to using these modern AI tools, modern ML tools that are available to us today. They are motivated to learn, but what they sometimes lack is this real world experience. A lot of them have excellent backgrounds, excellent technical knowledge. They have taken courses on YouTube's, they have and Coursera. They have attended certain boot camps. They're comfortable writing code in small pieces. But one thing that is oftentimes missing is how do you identify a complex business problem, and then how do you break it down into small pieces, and how do you embed AI into some of those pieces to then connect all of these different dots, and how do you every job, for example, values real world examples, real world experience, some good code examples documented on their GitHub profile. But how do you really get there? A lot of the times, early career professionals find themselves in a bind where they know these small projects, they have worked well with clean data sets, but sometimes they lack this connection. They have done extremely good work, but they lack this connection to showcase that good work in the right format, in the right channel, to document their work in the right format, such that it's available for the world to see. And that is something that holds them back. So for those who are seeking a structure for their projects, a little bit of fine tuning on their projects, some mentorship, some feedback and validation on their projects, or for folks who are wanting to learn new types of projects, those are also some of the personas that will benefit from the talk today. And then we have the IC roles who are, let's say, in the industry for a while, for around more than 15 to 30 years. And these are I think the previous slide, Devik, the specialist. Yeah, yeah. Um, no,
I think
the
here in
senior
the
tech
early
role, the
career pro
specialist.
thing,
Yeah, this one.
in the early career pro thing, right? Like one important detail also that you would touched upon, I think, is that when you read papers and when you see like example notebooks of models, like they look great, and they look amazing on benchmarks. But when you start translating them into your own world, you
Right.
see a massive gap, and then that is where I think turning an inchoate idea or nebulous idea into a POC that looks good to an actual product, right? That is where the rubber meets the road, and you have to like think about first of all, like, how will you evaluate your good solution? How will you create a data set that literally validates your use case, right? How will
Right.
you kind of like sunshine it to powers that be, and then how will you like get traction and like actually spin it up as something that is something that you want to lead and deliver on, right? Like, so I think all of those things become clearer as you gain more and more insights into where failures might lurk, where you need to ramp up on, and all these other kind of like real world things that you need to
Correct.
um, bake into your whole solutioning. Yep.
Absolutely agree.
Yep.
Right. So for folks who have been in the industry for a while, but who are more on the individual contributor track, so these are the folks who may have had a very strong background in certain specialized domains. Over time, they may have gained experience in one particular domain, like data engineering or full stack software development, and they might also have some deep implementation experience, but maybe they are not super familiar with some of the tools and techniques available to them as of today. Maybe they feel that they have younger engineers that they have to work with, who might be faster. But then with their 15 to 30 years of experience, they have a lot more depth associated with a certain business context. And they just need to adapt this business context and combine this with the modern tools and techniques available to them. And um, some of the folks in this for example, my mentors at some of the previous companies that I've worked for, and also at TikTok, some of them are extremely good at identifying what business opportunities lie in e-commerce where there is a need for data-driven optimization. What are some of the needs in logistics and transportation network which can use some methods like reinforcement learning based optimization, policy based optimization methods, but they they are good at identifying these opportunities, but maybe they are not aware of some of the tools that can connect these opportunities to the solution using machine learning. Hopefully, this talk will also address some of those pathways or some of those avenues that you can take to fill that gap. will expose you with not only how to identify particular problems, but once you identify a problem, what are some of the tools and the techniques and the pathways that you have at your disposal to connect the two. Next slide. Right. And finally, you have folks who are not on the individual contributor track, but more on the managerial side, as I said previously. And these are the people who have had a serious amount of experience leading companies, leading complex business projects, working with the C-suite, communicating high-level product ideas, leading 0 to 1 development of certain products, managing large teams. And most of their time goes in attending meetings, trying to decide on a business strategy, trying to decide on a quarterly budget or a half a year look forward plan. And a lot of the times they will not go into deep into a particular code base or try to write some nuances associated with a particular code. So folks in on the managerial side need to still know the broad lay of the land. They need to know, they need to learn how to hire well. They need to be good at identifying good AI talent. And how do you really do that? If you don't know the tools, if you don't know what is out there for you to judge people and to get some good insights to find the good talent where that is, it becomes it becomes a little bit difficult to then build impactful teams, because you are essentially missing out on folks who could have solved your business problem with their with the toolkit that they have gained. So and Parivesh can hopefully speak to this as well with his hiring experience. But in my experience, a lot of the managerial leaders that I have worked with, again in big tech company like TikTok, and also at some of my previous companies, the successful ones were really good at identifying good talent and keeping themselves abreast of the latest state of the art development in their particular field. So they would read reports from McKinsey or BCG on the overall state of AI. They would read academic research papers on what is happening in their latest research field. They would read papers on literature review, which summarizes the past decade from a very academic perspective and what is happening in AI. So they keep a very high level pulse on what is happening from an academic perspective and pushing the boundaries of algorithms and mathematical and computational techniques. And also, they have a very good idea of where the business landscape is headed, generally speaking. Do you have something to add, Parivesh?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, anecdotal, from an anecdote perspective at Amazon, for example, we had a director who was like, like, always used to say, hey, if something great is working great, keep it in the keep the lights on kind of a mode, but think about the next big thing. And that next big thing would almost always entail an AI moonshot that you could still tie back to a business need. So I think one important thing is to those leaders are really good at of Suhit said, right, like do not think that they're not abreast with the latest and greatest, and they might go through a review, literature review, and they also have some people who they will go with and say, hey, do you think that I am thinking on these lines, do you think that this is something we could take up, right? And they will have that
Right.
science validated, like in terms of feasibility, and then they will have it started, right? They will get a buy-in and everything, right? Like so, studying the AI competitive landscape, plus also understanding the boundaries of do's and don'ts and feasibility, right? And all of that comes in, and I've seen like great leaders really being able to like have that foresightedness to embark on a potentially risky but having a high payoff kind of a scientific endeavor with a good business need. So I think all of those things I've seen personally play out big time at Amazon. Yeah.
Great. Um,
Yep.
so we talked about a lot of we talked a lot about who are these different types of folks who might benefit from a transition to AI? Who are these different who are these different folks and what buckets do they fall in? But now I want to take a quick stab at why now? Like why should we focus on this right now? What has changed that brings us to this question right now? So as you may all be very well aware that the US tech market right now is not in its glory days as it was in the just post-COVID era. Um, if you look at the chart on the top left, the job posting rate it is nowhere near what it was just after COVID. There are tech companies which are laying off a lot of they're restructuring their workforce. They're laying off a lot of folks who they claim to identify are not AI enabled is the phrase that they sometimes use. But not all is gloom and doom, right? If you look at the chart on the right, specifically focus on those two yellow dots and what those two yellow dots, the trajectory of the two yellow dots, what it's saying is that even though they are reducing some workforce and restructuring some of their workforce, what is also happening is that the workforce which is AI enabled or the jobs which require identification of problems which may or may not be solved by AI or computational methods or data-driven modeling is increasing. And you don't have to just look at the data, right? There's a lot of funding there's funding towards new companies being started, and there's funding which is also going into AI infrastructure. A lot of data center projects are investing a lot of money is going into these large scale long term projects. Spending trillions of dollars, billions of dollars on a data center is not something that you can reverse within a day. This is something that shows that even if something doesn't work tomorrow, they're in this for a long haul. They are willing to take some time to identify what is going to happen in the next 5 years, next 10 years, maybe next 20 years. And so with this kind of investment going into the foundational infrastructure layer, we know that more and more job job roles will at least seek to identify opportunities that can be enhanced with AI driven techniques. Parivesh, do you have something to add here?
I mean, I can only think of an analogy that I think one of the great VCs gave is like, think of this as like the age of discovering refrigeration.
Right.
And I mean, then will come the time of Coca-Colas and Pepsis and all that, right? So the software principle of like composition of very complex things through like fundamental blocks, right? So you will be composing a lot of things on top of what is being in being built now, right? Models, infrastructure, and what have you. So I think, and that also already the good thing is that has concurrently started in terms of like agentic workflows and all these things, right? So it's not like a sequential process. It's like parallel. Money is flowing into the foundational work, but parallelly, people are like starting to and big time like think about how do they can integrate right away. And there will come a time suppose that the functional work will slightly lag, and then the composition will start like front running it. Um, yeah, that's all. So if you are well prepared, then when that time comes, right, like you will definitely be in a very good place, in my opinion. Yeah, to leverage it.
Right. Right. And so, with that being said, as I alluded to on the previous slide, that more and more jobs are seeking this AI infused capabilities and talent. The AI role and the ecosystem itself is also changing, right? At the top of the pyramid, or depending on the way you think about it, they form like the foundational layer of the pyramid in a way. That's based on your perspective, I guess. Is this core model development? Think about people who write research papers. Think about like people who work at FAIR. FAIR is the Facebook AI research lab, or people who work in Google DeepMind, people who work in Anthropic, OpenAI, and their job essentially is to read the latest and greatest research papers, work with academia and come up with new models and techniques that really push the envelope, push the boundaries of what we have today. So those are the AI researchers. A little bit more on the applied side are the folks who use these models and embed them into certain products. So those are like the ML engineers and data scientists. And then based on all of the work done by these folks, there's folks who need to take these models and set up the infrastructure that will run these models. Most of these AI models are very compute heavy, very resource heavy, and just deploying them is not as simple as deploying any static piece of code that is going to run. So it requires a lot of infrastructure, a lot of GPU if your model is is uh, is computationally resource intensive. And so a lot of work goes into AI infrastructure, machine learning operations, and creating robust data driven pipelines. And then based off of all of beyond all of these roles, there's also folks who take all of the work and the foundation laid by the above two clusters of roles and then embed them into the final product idea, right? Or they can just identify some new business need and identify where AI can enhance that particular business need. So product managers, program managers, some niche product driven domain expert is something that is also seeing a particular growth. One anecdotal example that I was talking to my friend yesterday, actually from Salesforce, was on forward deployed customer AI solutions engineer. That's a big role that is also gaining popularity these days. So what this particular role is responsible for is essentially what that last bullet point says there, a domain expert combined with AI skills. So essentially a person who has worked in a tech oriented role and also is very aware of the different AI techniques and tools available to him or her and is very good at identifying which business opportunity or a business problem could be solved with the tools available right now. So next slide, please. And right, so this is just the same thing that I was saying on the previous slide, but drawn showing the end-to-end process. So typically, whenever you identify a business problem that you think might be uh, which might be solved by or which AI might help optimize or solve. Typically, that starts by identifying a small use case. So let's say, for example, at TikTok, one use case was, should we be using a foundational model? Should we be using off-the-shelf large language model to classify something? Or should we build our own LLM to do the same task? And so typically you will create a use case which is a very small structured data set and try testing on that. You will scope it out. Typically you will involve all the stakeholders. They could be product managers, get their buy-in, show them the work that you have done, get the data engineers involved to pre-process your particular data set, train your small model, test your model. That's where research scientists and ML engineers come into play. Let's say that your offline testing succeeded and now you are happy with your model and now you want to push this model forward into deployment. That's where your DevOps or MLOps engineers who are expert in like laying out the AI infrastructure, they come in. They are responsible for model serving. And then finally, how good is your model? Once the model is online, do you just leave it and forget about it? No, right? You will have to keep on evaluating if what if some of the input features change? What if there's feature drift? So you run some A/B testing experiments, have your data scientist work on model monitoring and metric tracking. And again, all of these roles essentially work very closely with each other, and there's a slight bit of overlap on many of these roles. Do you have something to add, Parivesh?
No, I think this is comprehensive. But yeah, generally, yeah, I think the broader story is that there's a place for everyone. So like if you understand AI and if you think that like you can essentially like pivot or redefine what you do, right? You can add bells and whistles to what you already know and get
Right.
injected into wherever you see fit. Right? It doesn't have to be like, hey, I have to become Einstein and then join the work stream. You have to think about how you can pivot and where you essentially blend in, which of these particular nodes you can blend in almost seamlessly. And then with time, you can rediscover and say, hey, you know what, from let's say pre-processing or I want to, like for model training, I want to move gradually towards understanding better model serving, for example,
Right.
right? So I mean, so you could always start from a node and move towards nodes that really interest you and whatever, right? So I think, yeah, so that is how you should look at it. Where can you position yourself and how you can move to what you need?
Right.
Yep.
Right. And so, is with all of that being said, we talked about who this session is for. We talked about why it's important to talk right now. What remains to be answered is, given that we have established a case for AI and why it's useful for a variety of different roles, Devik, do you want to like maybe talk a little bit about what are some of the pathways that you can identify to help connect some of these gaps that
Yeah,
we
surely,
talked
surely.
about previously?
Thanks, Shurat and Parivesh, for the insights of the current industry, giving numbers of the current market. What I have taken away from the last 20 minutes or 25 minutes is one, a lot of roles coming in, new roles coming in. You give examples, what Salesforce, you give your friends example, how, new role may come up in the Salesforce. I heard that our previous roles, how they will be evolved with the new AI coming in, the new technologies coming in. We heard about there's a lot of investment coming in AI, right? A lot of investments coming in AI. That means definitely people are right now, the market is not what it used to be, but the market is good for the a person who are AI enabled. So now what I try to do is I'll answer, try to segment everyone, right? What we know currently is, right, is it's evolving very fast, right? And a lot of roles coming in, a lot of roles may get redundant. So what we definitely know right now is there's no one, like they say, there's no one size fits all. So we have to have everything custom made. So what we have tried to do with our programs, or probably in the interview Kickstart, is we try to map or try to show the path or try to build the path based on the questions which I have listed in here. So what we ask all our learners is, uh, what is the current domain or what is the current skill set? See why this is important. Every domain or every skill set, we have a different path for the AI enablement. They have a different path for AI up level. And maybe, probably giving a random example, we come across a lot of learners who are currently PM, TPM, they want to transition to MLE, right? Definitely, it's not like the transition is very smooth or transition very, very, I'll say easy, but the transition is there. So we show them what are the prerequisite, like if an PM or if an TPM is planning to move to MLE, he has to know that there will be some part of coding involved for sure. Obviously the quantum or the hands-on experience would be less required, and that's why we have a for every transition we do keep a little bit of tracks for whatever prerequisite is required for the coding part. Going by the second example, let's say the desired goals and outcomes. Why this becomes a very critical part in the decision making on what path we have to take is, we come across a lot of learners who come and say, ki, okay, right now I'm fine, I'm in my domain. I want to move in the current company only, but move up the ladders. Then the domain, then the pathway would be different. We come across saying that, okay, I'm fine with whatever I'm doing, but there's one project coming in my company. It's very important, probably very important for my appraisal, very important for my role moving forward. I only want to learn only specific to that particular program, but particular that project. And we do come across a lot of senior folks, 15 plus, 30 plus, saying that a lot of things are going ahead. I'm trying to manage new folks, very fast paced folks, new engineers who are very hands on MLE. I'm not that hands on in MLE as of now. So I don't want to learn everything, but I want to know how to manage them, right? So that's why the goal, the outcomes will define what path we have to take, right? Last, the most important part, and where I think a lot of folks fail. See, it's a very tough journey for the transition. It's a very I won't say it's a very easy journey with respect to learning. I'm saying what I see a lot of learners um, don't calculate the time commitment part very well. By that I mean, if we are transitioning to a role like AI, which is in high demand, cutthroat competition, we need to take this part very, very seriously. So what we cater, or how we position our all our pathways are we have to know what are the monthly commitments you can give, what are the weekly commitments you can give, and if needed, like what are the daily commitments you will be needed. A person who's not very hands-on on coding, right, versus a person who's a very hands-on on coding, probably on a similar back, probably both from backend, probably both from full stack, or probably both from TPM, would have a different success rate, or would have to put a different time commitment, even if they're on the right same program. Why? Obviously, they're how good are they with the probably coding, maths, and most likely their familiarity with the AI/ML. Right. This is the most common questions people are very confused with, and that's how whenever we try to answer that, we try to ask them this the questions. What are your answers for these questions? So based on what I was telling in the last slide, what we try to do is we have segmented in two ways, right? One is a learner who is right now very comfortable in his role, but he knows, he's very aware about that the current success, whatever he's getting in his role, is not future proof, so he has to up level in AI. For that, we do the program called Edge Up, where what we do is we try to make them AI up level, AI enabled in their current role, and then obviously club it with an interview prep for 3 months, and there that is where we probably try to get them in FAANG companies, top tier companies, get them interview ready for the upcoming interviews, which will be all about AI. So this pathway is for those folks. The second pathway, and I won't say the most chosen one, but the most sought out these days because of the keyword MLE engineer, is to switch completely to ML. Right, like I give you a previous example. Right now, we are not getting only and only backends, full stack, and front end probably EMs moving to this. We're getting TPMs and PMs also to move. Request on moving, and if it's moving, we do have examples. There are a lot of examples who have successfully moved, but obviously, like I said, the time commitment, the commitment with respect to whatever whatever the learners have been based on their backgrounds, preferably depends on that the transition. Here, what we do is it's a I would say it's a pretty heavy on time, depending upon your familiarity with the coding. We try to segment this in our ML flagship. We try to segment this in advanced ML. Both are both can be chosen based on your time commitments, based on your familiarity with the coding, and based on your how well versed you are with maths. And just what I've tried to do in the next consecutive 2 3 slides is just what Shurit was mentioning, what all the learners who joined this session would be currently, their work experience would be. So we will have probably 5 to 15 years of work experience, folks. How I have seen the last couple of years, how the market has evolved, how the demand has evolved, I'll say, is most of the folks are going towards the switching part, right? But there are considerable folks which want to stay in their current domain as well, right? What I'm trying to showcase here is, while most of the focus is people are moving towards the MLE engineers because of again the keyword and the extremely high compensation attached to it. We have made two profiles, two pathways to it. One, obviously, for the folks who are less coding, who know very less coding and want to get into the entry level or the mid level MLE roles, but are not towards the deployment part, or just want to have a grasp knowledge of deep learning, probably computer vision. But for the folks who come from a hardcore coding background, like like backend, full stack, front end, and folks who have transitioned to probably scaled up to EM as well at times, do come in this advanced ML as well. This is a course which is full. I think you don't have to do anything at least for the next 5 6 years for whatever is happening in the AI. This we regularly update both the courses. Right now it's properly updated with respect to what is going on in agentic, and the focus towards the bottom part, that is the for the learners who are right now fine with the current role, fine with the current company, and probably want to just up level, or want to stay in their domain and change the company. So that is the program which we called Edge Up. The most unique part about this program is this is all based on your profile. So we have figured out some 18 to 21 profiles. Most of our tech professionals would be in this segment. So what we found out was is the learning capability, the grasping of the tech, how fast we can move depends upon the profile, depend on learners' background as well. So we try to club it based on their profile, so that it's very custom made for everyone. So it's not like I'm learning this, I'm teaching the same thing to a TPM, I'm teaching the same thing to a software engineer. It's all different, right? While Gen AI agentic is a common term, but the application of it with all I would say profiles would be extremely different. So this is what probably I'm showing in the next slide as well. This is again, these are folks who are probably in mid, I'll say 15 plus career experience. While obviously, very understandable, the transitioning request is less here, right? But still, we do come up, like Shreya was telling, we do come up a lot of senior folks who are right now moving towards, up leveling them and probably completely moving towards MLE. Again, there also we have the same path, our ML flagship, and depending upon your coding, our advanced ML. But in this specific, let's say, work experience, majority of the focus remains in the current, just up leveling in the current domain, and probably trying a better opportunity, trying a better project in the current company. So this, when we talk about moving to FAANG, we also cover about, we do get a lot of requests on I have a project coming up, but it's I want to say in the same company. Probably I'm already in the FAANG, or probably in the good company. I've established myself, but for me to move to those role, for me to move all the AI roles, I need to have interviews. I need to crack those interviews with senior management, probably with the MLE folks. So again, when we are focusing towards this, we are covering that as well. So that again, we're not only focusing on you moving out of your company. We're only making you future proof in your own company as well, and obviously transition to better projects, or probably handling bigger teams. Uh, uh, now I think the most interesting segment and the most I'll say sought out these days are the our leaders, tech leaders, the managers, directors, TPM, and again so-called all the tech leaders. Very interestingly, what we have noticed, and this pattern is specifically, I'll tell you, last 1 year, 1.5 years, is we do get requests a lot of for transition as well. We try to understand why are these requests coming, and why a lot of people are sorting moving towards probably an IC role. One was obviously the amount or the compensation attached to it. At times in FAANG and top tier companies, we do have very competitive IC I'll say compensation. That was one reason, but a very interesting reason which I figured out was they only want to learn, let's say, the top level of it, only to manage whatever the new talent will come in. So they're already preparing themselves. Okay, okay, my next 10 year, my next 5 year, whatever team I'll be building, whatever new folks, whatever tech leaders or mid-level leaders I'll be handling, they all will be tech enabled. So it's not possible for me to handle a project. It's not possible for me to guide them. It's not possible for me to help them where are they getting stuck, unless I myself don't know the basics, or at least the top level of AIML. So that is something very interesting these days coming up. Leaders coming up only to learn, and probably not seeking transition, but be ready to handle bigger teams and AI enabled teams. Whereas again, very understandable, this domain is very dominant. This experience segment is very dominant currently with uh, again up leveling in their own segment, because what we see specific, the leaders obviously keep on telling, we have been learning last 15, 20 years. We have been every 2 years, there's some new technology coming in. Where does this stop? Like how much we have to learn? The answer is very simple. We keep on learning. We keep on hustling. There's no stop to it. There was 2 years back, there was Gen AI, now there's an agentic AI. Now there will be advance of it. This doesn't stop, going by I think, the laws which we have learned in the physics. The evolution will continue. Probably the advancement will continue, and so as the technology will. And if we have to be relevant, we have to be very up to the market, towards the whatever is coming very fast in the market. That's why again, a very understandable. Okay, this is a lot more focus on my own domain, and I up level in that domain, right? Yes, and just to brief you on this. So again, I think all of you, whoever is attending the session, you would have a lot of doubts. I would urge you to reach out to your, probably program advisors, because everything, whatever your doubts are, they would have to be answered, understanding your commitments, your skill set, your domain, your goals, and where obviously your time commitments. So we have program advisors who are specialists in this, who probably interact with probably 500, 600 learners, curious learners like you in a month. They'll be able to guide you with a custom path very well, right? Probably better than giving you a custom path there. So yeah, there's a link there. If you are able, we'll float this as well for you to probably block time with us, or you can block time with me also. I can come up, chip in, and help you with the suggestions, and probably guide you towards who will be the better person to manage your queries. I think now the how part, and Parivesh, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like like Devik said, right? There are different roles, and people need to like essentially think about how to position themselves, and that essentially entails understanding a few things, right? Like so, um, key things that will help you differentiate, of course, is that know your domain really well, right? Like inside out, right? So definitely people, when they are trying to gauge you for a potential role, they are trying to like measure the depth of like your expertise in a particular domain, right? So uh, whatever domain knowledge you already have, make sure that you really like do not like double down on it, right? Like don't give it away. So you should know your stuff beyond surface level. And domain might encompass also, like if AI is there, then vision. So you can think of like domain itself as like vision, natural language processing, whatnot, right? Multimodal. So you can expand your definition of domain in a way. But so this is where the understanding of theory comes in, right? Like you have an in-depth understanding of that underlying theory, fundamental building blocks, and all these kind of things. But that is of course calibrated in your interviews, but also things like, hey, do you have any proof of like the fact that, hey, you understand something really well theoretically, but have you translated it into something that works? Can I see artifacts of your code somewhere? Or have you built projects, right, where which essentially marry the theory with practice, right? And that is why I think you need to essentially be able to showcase some specimens of your work. And uh, and that of course is a differentiating factor, like I said. And okay, so this definitely, these two portions, right, are get you will potentially get you a foot in the door, because that essentially all these aspects get articulated on your resume, right? And maybe a GitHub link and whatnot. But when the time comes, like when you start talking to people, right, you will need to manifest these skills in one-on-one conversations, right? So that might entail being able to articulate clearly how you think about problems, right? And that might start from very ambiguous problem statements for the system design interviews, not just like regular system design, but ML system design interviews, right? How will you think about taking a very nebulous problem and then like crystallizing it into something that you can attack, and what will be the different components and whatnot, right? So when you have actual expertise of building things and you have that experience, it is easy to tie back to be able to answer those questions, right? And also, like, of course, you will have coding problems, you will have mathematical questions being asked, right? So that is where it will be both of these things, right? Your domain depth that you have acquired through your learning experience and the projects you have done painstakingly throughout the program. All of those things will come in handy in a real world interview scenario, right? So the two, if you could think from a software engineering perspective, domain depth and proof are more like offline things you do, and signal intensity is what like the online, right? The more like an influencing thing. It's like you are acting in the real world based on what you have done in the light blue and dark blue portions. Over to the next one, please. Yeah. So I mean, if you were to, let's say, embark on like this journey yourself, and which, by the way, I mean, many people do, and it's a perfectly good endeavor to be on. But the problem there is that there's a whole gamut of things out there, right? So uh, and so we, like people, a lot of people get confused by like so many tools out there in the market. And also, like like when you have this such kind of offline experience, like I don't know, I can't say for everyone, but many people are there who might start a Coursera course with like a lot of gusto and then lose steam as life happens. uh, or they might find, like, say, MOOCs to be at I wouldn't say at the surface level, but not to the greatest depth that you might need, right? Like, so they might gloss over some math because they want more traction with a broader audience, right? So you could have like all kinds of things that happen generally when you are trying to like, or you could go through a YouTube lecture series of like 31. So if you're well disciplined on paper, yes, everything you can do on your own, but sometimes it helps to have like a collective classroom experience with a very curated, like, kind of like a thing, right, where you are egged on by circumstances and what you see around you, and you, lo and behold, you have finished the race. So I think it's important to be able to like essentially distill of the lot of so many tools out there, what are the things that work for me, and how can I curate my learning experience really well. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. What do you think, Suhrid? Do you have anything to add to that? um, whatever I've said, like in terms of like your own travels or learnings around like the learning experience itself.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely. I think I came from a very different background. I came from a mechanical engineering background and transitioned to machine learning and generative AI driven roles. And what I've observed is exactly what you said. Like if you go for certain self-paced courses, unless you find really, really good ones where the content is very curated, which are very few in numbers. If you go for the generic ones, then sometimes they'll like gloss over some of the details. There's too much focus on getting some quick, shiny implementations done without quite covering the depth associated with a particular topic. Now, that is useful, but what is also more useful and can set you apart from the crowd is not just knowing how to use a particular tool, but knowing a little bit about how it was built. If you somehow got that analogy. For example, it's great to know how LLM works and how ChatGPT works, but wouldn't it also be nice to know how it was really built, how it was really trained? Because if you do know that, you can then make a claim in your role or in your job on if what are some of the flaws of LLMs and ChatGPT and where it might fail. If you know how it was built, you would be able to at least be in a position to make an educated guess on where this tool might not work as expected. And that is something that I in my classes, when I teach, I try to always combine that theory, that intuition, with some practical implementation as well. And so there's a balance of the mathematical intuition and definitely a focus on the practical implementation of that as well.
Yeah, I
And
agree
that is
completely.
something
And
that really
just,
helped me transition from Mechie type of field to the ML
yeah.
world essentially.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, great. I mean, I myself, like when I teach things, like for example, if you look at the current trend in LLMs, just to like, drive home that point is like, you will see like, hey, everyone keeps talking about post-training RL or reasoning models, right? Like, yes, great. All of us might be using a deep research feature, right? But the real differentiator, like differentiating factor might be, hey, do you really understand what is the why is RL being useful here? How is RL being able to how is RL able to help and bake bring out reasoning out of an LLM, right? And that is why we I mean, for a lot of like we actually teach RL in great depth, for example, and then we go back and tie it back to LLM, because when you're teaching LLM, sometimes people might not be ready for, let's say, a very targeted concept like PPO or something, right? So what we do also is that we have these theoretical feedback loops where if we come to an advanced concept later that we know that we had to wait past because at that time you were not ready, we go back and tie that whole thing, right? So that your knowledge becomes more and more complete. So we do that all the time. We have paper surveys, right? A very, very bespoke courses and experiences here. We are not just like talking out of like a canned experience. We literally have a dynamic experience that we try to like bake into our teaching regimen. Anyway, now, so these are the three broad questions, right? Like what to learn. Like, so if you think of of you can try to learn anything in the world, but question is like, what are you interested in and what do you want to learn, right? So what to learn is an important question that you definitely need to like brood over. And once you have decided, like, hey, this is what I want to learn, and then the next question is where to learn it from, right? And I would also say not just where, I would say who, right? So where and who, right? Who to learn it from and where to learn it from, right? All of those are very important things, right? Like the right resources and the right people. If you were to have like an active learning experience, like who to learn it from and who to observe, where to look at code, right? And that's why GitHub has so many repositories, but you like looking at repositories with a lot of stars, right? Because you somehow credibility and credence, these two attributes are very important for and the last bit is like how to learn, right? Like you can learn, in multiple ways, and they are like properly researched ways that enable learning of very, very difficult subjects, particularly things like active learning, for example, right? When you essentially have things like you learn something, then you have a problem, many problems from that area that help you like think about how can you combine these different concepts to attack a problem, right? So when you have that like feedback loop of learning something and then trying it out on different kinds of problems of different varying complexity, that kind of like really makes your learning experience very rich, and also like gives you a mastery over the subject. Anything to add, Surit, around that piece, like around learning experiences and all that? Yep.
No, I think you summarized it very well. Essentially, what to learn, where to learn, and how, and also what you said, who to learn from, and essentially all of those things are tackled very well in what we do here. So you, nothing more to add beyond what you just said.
Okay, cool. And so here, right, for example, like, just to give like, a week preview of like what happens during a week, for example, and is like, you might have like a technical class. So like, things start on a Sunday. So on a Sunday, you might be looking at, let's say, generative AI class, text to text models, for example, right? So you will typically have like some sort of a preparatory material that will be available to you on some platform. So just to warm up, like more like a warm up. Then you will actually have an instructor who literally does this in real life for a living, and very good material and all that, right? Like so, that class will go on for like 4 hours or 5 hours or whatnot. And that also happens not just because it's a monologue. It's like we literally like pause, ask questions, take questions, right? And like so that's like that's a live experience. But one session is not enough, right? Like after that you have time to, you have to go back, brood on it, have a recall, and then you have, like, for example, you will have practice questions that will come, right? So there will be questions around the material covering different kinds of concepts. And then you might have like some concepts where you are kind of struggling, so you might like some help, like like some one-on-one with an instructor, or you might like pull in, your batch might pull in a set of questions where everyone is struggling. And that's why we'll have like a technical class or something, which is like a 2-hour class where you might go over like a set of questions, or whatever questions you want to bring in to the picture, right? And then you have like this very the other piece, like the technical career coaching kind of thing, right? Where let's say you have an interview coming up for a very niche role, or you have like some very, like, for example, let's say you get a call from like some company where you are supposed to think only through the lens of being able to deploy a model on the edge, right? Like so then that is essentially like needs a separate set of skills and thinking thought process of, hey, now my models need to be smaller, they need to use the hardware well, and all these things. So what we do very well is that we match, we have a very good large pool of good instructors. Very likely one of them will be like really from that domain, might even be in that company, right? And we like really do a well, like a one-on-one matching kind of a thing, like when such kind of important times arise. And above and beyond that, of course, like you can ask, hey, how should I prepare? I'm trying to interview for the next 1 or 2 months. This is where I'm faltering. You could have a very clear and clear articulation of where do you typically falter, and someone like Suhaid can go ahead and say, hey, this is what you can do better, and maybe they will tie in that with their own failings, because I have failed. Everyone fails at some point in some interview, right? So we can always like humanize the whole process and see how you can go and overcome such kind of things, right? And like I said, the foundation video lectures, once the lectures are done, right, they get recorded, you have that in your pool of videos forever. You can always go back and study them, right? Like so this is like something that we keep doing it over and over and over again for every module that we teach. So anything you want to like call out that you really find useful about that diagram, like anything that where you see that um, which you really find very attractive about the whole thing, given that you also
Right. I
teach?
think
Yeah.
one thing that has really helped me in my self-study and even formal study of the material is the material is by nature very dense. If it was very easy, everybody would be an expert today. The fact that you need a structured curriculum and this collaborative learning mechanism like this is because the material is both, it's broad and it's deep, and you have to do a little bit of both. You have to cover the breadth and the depth. And what really stands out to me in this particular workflow or diagram, so to speak, is, as Pariva said, we focus and throw a lot of material on Sunday. So it's like drinking from a fire hose. But then you go back, you have time to ponder. And if while pondering you discover that, oh, there was something that you missed on Sunday, there are follow-up sessions immediately during that week within the next 2 to 3 days where you can get your questions clarified and doubts clarified. And then following that, you will have a um, uh, structured assignments and review sessions to go over the material that was presented on Sunday to hone those concepts even further. And that is the workflow that works well, because then that doesn't just keep you in the dark on what you learned on Sunday, and then we all forget about it. We revisit those concepts again and again throughout the week, and even throughout the curriculum, and show the same information from a different lens. And once you, because these concepts are so abstract, sometimes looking at them from different angles really helps you digest them and assimilate them. And that is something that really stands out to me.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. But like you said in the previous, we saw in the workflow, right? Yes, great. It is very good temporarily in the sense that, hey, you learn something and over 1 week, you are like continuously ramping up on like, hey, where can I tie the loose ends in terms of understanding one concept more and all, right? But project is where, hey, let's say you've learned everything and now is the time to apply it. And now typically what happens is that, um, uh, project is a very key thing. Like I think Sohit mentioned that you need the ability to take something to completion. So yes, you might have the greatest understanding of world in the world about a certain algorithm, but developing the eye of what to use where, because in this area what happens is that, let's say for just to quote an example, for a vision encoder you have 100 different models, right? Each with different latencies, different powers, right? And you can typically say the same thing about different language models, like decoder only, 100 different decoder only models, right? How to piece string together multiple things so that it works in all of those things work in tandem to accomplish something, right? Is only comes through practice. You develop that eye of what will work and what will not work, and the ability to preemptively like foresees a lot of those things, right, comes through practice, through building real world things. The composition that I'm talking about, right? You can learn each of these different models in great depth, but the ability to compose them, multiple things together to accomplish something, comes through more and more practice. So that's why I think here we have like different kinds of projects. So as you can see, right, like starting from the fact that you have a course that came through, you have assignments. Those assignments can entail theoretical questions as well as coding questions that are very like tailored to, like, let's say answer like, hey, code up a module to like self attention module, for example, right? So you could have like very specific conceptual coding thing, but then you could have a mini project where, let's say you are trying to build an LLM that only does well on, let's say, coding FAQs or NVIDIA doc FAQs, right? So we might give you like a very a very tunnel view of a problem, but that will need you to like really like hoop through many such things to be able to solve them. And then you, so you will have mini project, and then you might also have like again assignments, right? So you have a mini project, let's say you learn something, but you might give a more difficult assignment might come through, right? And we keep doing it for not just like say in vision, you might have not just one mini project, you might have many mini projects. And not just in computer vision, now you have done something in NLP, something in reinforcement learning, all kinds of like projects you have done. And now all of that will culminate into like a capstone project, which might need like not just like one vertical to know deeply, but also like multiple things to will need to come together. So example might be, hey, build and recommendation systems, uh, that where you can plug in a query and let's say get top ranked video over from a corpus of 100,000 videos or something, right? So that will need you to like think through many different things to be able to do. So that is what I find really useful, is like mini projects, and you build this like academic muscle, and then you gradually like you keep getting better and better, and now you have a capstone project that really like takes it to like whole different new level. Anything to add there, Sohit? I think the previous slide was like something like, I think everyone will benefit from what you have to say about the project landscape.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of different projects that we expose you too. And then based off of those projects, you can like modify them and take them into your own direction that essentially are not just toy projects that like the Titanic data set that is on
Yeah.
everybody's resume these days. These projects are essentially very curated from real world examples. And for some of the classes that I've taught, I've gotten feedback that folks have implemented, like, they have taken those coding files and created like an end-to-end app associated with that, and then put that app up on resume, and just based off of that they have gotten some introductory calls at or some interview calls at some of the startups. So those are the types of things that we encourage everyone to do, and these are just some of the sample projects that you can see here, and these are end to end, and you will be answering real design questions here, like what type of system should I be designing, what is important here, what should the input data shape look like. These are the questions that you always, it does get into the details, but these are the questions that you would want to think about. And this is something that will differentiate you from most of the folks out there who are taking curated data sets and then building a small chatbot on top of it. Because anybody can do that these days. What is difficult to do is identifying a niche problem and then using a set of tools, if at all, you need an LLM, then that to identify how to solve this particular thing. And that is something that is exposed to you through a bunch of these different projects and assignments and content out there.
Yeah, just to add to that, like if you look at the previous one, like slide, right? For example, style lens is something that I literally worked on at Amazon. It's like visual search feature. So if you look at it, right, like you can think of it like a mini project, but that mirrors something that actually is a product in the real world, like deep learning based fashion image retrieval system, for example, right? Or you can turn it into, hey, I'll point my camera to an object and can I do an image search? I don't know if you guys have used that, but literally like to do that, you will have to think about vision, like a lot of encoders and blah, 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 all of that. And you will visit all of those concepts, let's say if you were building style lens, right? So I think it kind of gives a straight signal, right? This guy has touched upon every core thing that needs to be touched upon, so that then the only thing that will change is the magnitude of that project, not like
Right.
you will have to learn a new concept from scratch. Yeah. Okay. So here, for example, right, like if you look at why do people fail, there could be many modes of failure, right? Like starting from like, interview questions, like, like have me completely stumped. I mean, that's almost always a signal that something is lacking, something you need to do better, right? Though I would consider like, like, so what are the kind of questions that really trump me? Are they more from a theoretical standpoint, or some, like if people start probing deeper and deeper and they find a limitation to my some frontier where I cannot go beyond it, kind of a thing, right? So interview questions from people all the time, of course. And then there are other, like even before that, you could have like a recruiter ghosting you. So hey, everything went well and you're like kind of like eagerly waiting for someone to come back, but at this time, right, many people are literally interviewing for the same position, right? Like, so it almost always happens that people are like, a recruiter might ghost you, or might be very late in coming back saying, hey, you have not come through or something, right? And generally, to avoid this, of course, you need to ace your interviews, but also like, if things are there on the resume where people will go back and like take a second pass of your resume, and then that is where, like, if something really material is there, they will have a hard time bypassing you, right? Like, so you minimize the likelihood of any of these things happening by of course, being good in the first place. But more importantly, like having some sort of a re-emphasis on how, like, of like your statement about you, without you going there again, right? What are those statements, right? Of course, your own performance that lives on in their memory, and also the resume again, right? So they might like to again. So typically, I'm sure so it will agree. We have a candidate review. So we have a, let's say there are three people, and all of them have like done reasonably well. You will go back and to a drawing board and see, hey, where their strengths lie and what they did well, or they have gone to a great school, or they've done amazing projects, right? So all of these things come together. So to make sure that you do not, you can preemptively like get overcome a lot of these fears. For example, like you can get more fluent in your communication, or you can actually go through an actual, almost actual real interview experience where you will be bombarded, for a lack of a better word, with like the same level of complexity questions that you might anticipate in an actual FAANG plus interview, real interview, right? Where and people will not just that, right? So the kind of questions you'll get from the IK pool of instructors will literally mirror the kind of complexities that you actually encountered. Number one, and number two, you are gauged on the metrics like that. Literally, we gauge people on when we interview a candidate, right? So you will get a feedback back from IK folks saying, hey, this is where you did well, this is where you could, they will give you cues around how you can improve, right? And it's not just like one singular session. You get like multiple such sessions where you can see yourself becoming more and more confident and progressively better. Just anecdotally, for example, I um, I come from a physics background, and I was mostly a math person. So one thing that I always found was like, hey, how do I become like a code junkie where people have been like literally doing breathing lead code day in day out, right? And so the my interfacing with IK was mostly from a coding perspective because math was never a problem. And what I found super useful was this whole set of like, of course, the theory and the system design, which you will learn in great depth. But more importantly, I think once the time came, right, like this real feedback based on like actual interviews that I was doing, like 20 interviews before you actually go for an interview. Like think about 20 such key interviews, right? Coding interviews or AI interviews or AI system design interviews as a part of this, right? I found that to be super useful and very parallel, very like literally like a very high similarity with like what an actual thing. Uh, so this is where, and also like, this burnout spiral is a real world thing. By the way, I mean, going back, hey, sorry, do you have anything to add? Sorry, sometimes bypass completely that you might have something super important to add as well. My bad. Yeah.
Um,
Do you have anything to talk about like these interview experiences yourself? Yeah.
uh, right. I think as I mean, interviewing is never fun, as most of us may have experienced. But I think one thing that has helped me in clearing some of these interviews successfully is just getting used to that level of complexity, the level of different perspectives that people have, and some of the curriculum that is designed here essentially is based off of all of those questions that come in a variety of interviews in this FAANG or FAANG plus setting, and where their question bank is and what are the type of things that they are looking for. So because of that curated curriculum, the content here becomes not just an academic exercise in theory, but something that is practical and translatable into an actionable insight later on in terms of interview performance. That's all
Yeah.
I wanted to add.
And one important thing I forgot, like that, like to string together is like people are there not just like doing actual interview, like simulating the actual interview, but also like, for example, like refining your resume. There might be like some giveaways in terms of your making your profile weak or something, right? Like, so what are the things that you need to add? How can you refine your resume to all the way till the end where let's say you did super well and now is the time to like negotiate. Some people are more reticent, they somehow end up like lowballing themselves, right? So IK also you can rope in IK support to bump up whatever you might get, right? If you were to go
Right.
alone, you might not always know the nuances of how to get that magical number you want for yourself, right? Like, so I think IK also becomes your help towards the end, so from beginning to end to end. Yeah. And this is like the burnout spiral where like you said, right, like if typically like the way people will do kind of will be, hey, they will go through an actual lot of interviews and then some interviews they will fail and they will feel demoralized and they will just completely like go off the hook, and they'll say, hey, I will approach this 3 months down the line, but the field is moving so fast. In 3 months a lot of things change and there's almost no feedback mechanism you have integrated to like big to have a second coming or to stage a comeback in a way, right? So a lot of people like get caught in this vicious cycle of like getting demoralized and never being able to like come to a point where they can do even better, right? So that is where we like kind of bake in this mindset that, hey, failures happen and this is why you fail, and you keep getting better and better, right? Like and all these kind of things. Yeah.
Right.
So do you want to like yeah, so in this case, for example, yeah, so if you if does anyone want to like talk about these things, or I can go on, like, so do you want to like take stab at like any of these things you want to talk about, or
Um, no, I think What you said summed it all up. Essentially, we like failing at interviews really is not, everybody has failed one or two and fail is a strong word. What does fail even mean? Like everybody has, I use the term learn something for the better
Fair enough.
for
Sorry.
in every no, no, it's nothing, it- everybody knows what you meant, but essentially what I try to take all of these failures is I try to go back and evaluate, did I truly not understand the concept, or did I like miss something, and therefore I could have done better. In either case, I come back trying to learn something, and then the curriculum here essentially is based off of some of those learnings from a variety of our experiences, and that is essentially what helps for interview preps, learning better, teaching yourself better, making those small progress day by day, such that you don't end up in this burnout and like a burnout spiral. Every time you enter this mindset, which is that this is a marathon and not just one sprint, like just that you're done and dusted after this one sprint. It's a marathon. It's a part of the process. That is the mindset that we bake in, and that is something that is, I think, truly helpful.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I'll just
Yeah.
move to the
So,
next.
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Parivesh and Shurit. I think you guys have already given the brief of how the learning pedagogy would be, how in depth those projects would be, what will be the significance of those assignments, how the week would look like, and most importantly, how IK helps in cracking the interviews or with the mock interviews, the detailed grading, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of folks are already waiting for the Q&As. I'll just skip the slides. There, we just want to highlight the same thing what Parivesh was highlighting, how why projects are very important. How do we crack those top interviews? Like you have to learn from the best, and no one better than who have already done it at the first place and show us how to do it. So when these are typical numbers which we show, these are the, like say, all the transitions happening have a typical increment of around 75K. The maximum go to 150. We have the maximum of 835 as well. I'll just skip to the next slide. And this is the numbers showcasing we are doing this for the last almost now 13 to 14 years. Uh, Close to 25K alums, our strong network of 700K FAANG instructors, average salary look like around 250K. This is the overall compensation. And obviously we have the outliers of 1.26 million as well. I think